So back in the 1970s, there's this teenage girl living in a small town in Bavaria. Bavaria is just southeast of Germany, bordering Austria. Her name was Anneliese Michael, and honestly, at first glance, she's just completely regular. Quiet, religious, focused on school, the kind of person you'd expect to grow up and become like a teacher or something. Although, I think mentioning that her upbringing was incredibly religious holds some merit, as it's a major catalyst and factor in what happens next. Around the age of 16, everything kind of flips on her. Annalise is actually the woman that the exorcism of Emily Rose was based off of in recent Hollywood. Albeit it was quite loose. Everything was normal until she was leaving class and she had a massive seizure at school. Out of nowhere, she collapses. Everyone would state that she was in like this trance-like state throughout the seizure, but then would snap out of it like it never happened. Although this freaks everyone out, especially in the 1970s, if you know anything about seizures, this is pretty normal. But like any good parents, her mother brought her to the neurologist to run tests, and quite quickly they came up to the conclusion that she has temporal lobe epilepsy. And honestly, that made sense for what had happened. This is a neurological condition where seizures start in the part of your brain that controls memory, emotions, and the way you interpret reality as a whole. So instead of shaking on the ground like you expect with most seizures, people with temporal lobe epilepsy may start to see things, hear things, feel pressure on their chest, smell something burning, or suddenly feel terrified for no obvious reasons. It really resembles a panic attack in modern society. The solution was no different than most cases like this, especially in the early 20th century. With 20th century medicine, we kind of went to that first. They gave her the meds, they monitored her, and they reassured the family, and for a little bit things seemed like they were kind of under control. But then her symptoms started shifting, and in a way that no one really expected. She started waking up terrified, like someone was sitting on her chest. She hears knocking in the walls and whispering she couldn't trace no matter where she was looking. Doctors were telling her these were hallucinations and they were all tied to her epilepsy, but to her they were incredibly real. This is happening over time. This didn't just start to change, it progressed gradually. Then she also started to change gradually. She gets quiet, withdrawn. The poor thing's exhausted all the time. Her grades are plummeting and she quite quickly leaves university altogether. She starts telling her family that she's seeing these dark shapes and faces during her episodes. She could be even just talking to me or you, and as she's looking at her face, it seems to like warp and alter in front of her to these demonic images. Doctors keep adjusting her meds, they try prescriptions, they get stronger, the cocktail gets worse. Nothing's getting better. Then around 1973, she suddenly develops this intense fear of everything religious objects, people, the like. She couldn't even step inside a church, said she felt physically sick around anything sacred, and her family being devout Catholics are like, okay, something is seriously wrong here. There is even a documented article that goes over her trying to walk to an altar where many religious clergy members are praying. She's unable to actually enter the ring around the altar, even tries to go in through the back. But as she's looking at these clergymen that are on the ground praying, she becomes incredibly uneasy, and she later describes that the praying members were actually beings, and their teeth were gnashing at her. This isn't 100% proven or documented, but it does paint quite a picture of what Annalise was going through, especially mentally. After all this, a local priest talks to her, but he doesn't quite jump to conclusions. He says, we need to keep moving with the medical treatment, but by this point, there's basically only two versions of Annalise's condition. The medical explanation, and then the spiritual one. And they're drifting further and further apart as this progresses. Doctors say depressive psychosis and epilepsy. Her family thinks they're watching something medicine can't quite explain. And the priests, they're taking notes, but they don't quite know what to make of it as of yet. By 1975, and after years of failed treatments and a steady decline, her family asks for a formal exorcism. See, you have to understand, the church doesn't just hand these out to anyone that's looking to have them. So her case goes through months of reviews, interviews, documentation. There's a whole slew of things that she needs to do before she can get approved. Finally, in September of 1975, the bishop approves it. They assign two priests. Father Ernst Alt, and Father Arnold Renz. And this, unfortunately, starts a series of what can only be described as a physically and emotional punishing set of rituals. There were a total of 67 exorcisms that were held in little less than a year's time. Doing anything that intense would really put a toll on even the healthiest individuals. And at this point, Annalise doesn't quite fall into that category. You can see where this is going. Some days she's calm, other days she's completely distressed and exhausted, or barely able to even participate. Her health just keeps dropping and plummeting. Weight loss, insomnia, worsening depression. There were days where she wouldn't speak to anyone and would hide under the tables for long hours. She was quoted by her parents as barking like a dog, walking on all fours, eating insects around the house. And although this is not completely verified and just conjecture, what is true is that she would drop to the floor multiple times a day to pray. She did this so much that her knees ruptured and her tendons broke. But she kept doing it despite any pains she may have been going through. During the exorcism sessions, the priests claimed that several entities were speaking through her, including well-known figures, Lucifer, Judas, and Nero, the Roman one, even Hitler. These names come directly from the tapes in the priest's logs, not playing those here for obvious reasons, but these aren't from the movies or any exaggerations. Her doctors pleaded for hospitalization, but soon after her parents requested that she no longer have any more medical care, and she agreed, although the state would say that she was not really in a position to make these decisions, especially involving her livelihood or health. Her family was convinced the rituals helped her, even if it was for these brief small spurts. Her priests believed they were doing something spiritual here. There was even a time for a few short months, she thought she was better, even tried to re-enroll in university and get on with her life. But as always, the sickness came back harder and stronger than ever before, and of course no one could agree on anything, not the churches and not the doctors. By spring of 1976, she's barely functioning. She can hardly walk, she never really eats, and her parents are with her all day and night. Everyone knows that they're really just running out of time. On June 30th, 1976, her priests performed one more exorcism. This is the last one of the 42 that were recorded, and Annalise did not survive the ordeal. Everything that happens after her passing sparks decades of debate, documentaries, court cases, movies, tons of it. But even with all of that, there's still no true answer to the one question that matters. What was actually happening to Annalise Michel? Now, that's where her story and events technically end. But this was just the beginning for the media and the churches. And honestly, this part's pretty wild. People don't know how much her case changed things. The trial blew up in 1978. Because remember, this became a legal case. The Catholic Church got absolutely hammered by criticism, not just from skeptics or doctors, but from theologians, scholars, and people inside the church. They said, why are we using a 350-year-old manual to make life or death decisions? At the time, exorcisms were still being done using the 1614 Ritual Romanian. Her case basically forced the church to admit, okay, yeah, we need to update some things. Obviously, exorcisms don't happen that often. So they start this massive internal review. This goes on for over 2 decades, and in 1999, the Vatican officially releases a new modernized rite of exorcism. This is the biggest update since the 1600s. The rules changed, and they changed hard. We now have multiple mandatory medical evaluations throughout multiple steps in the process. There are mandatory psychiatric screenings. Priests have to rule out all neurological disorders, psychosis, trauma, etc., before they can do anything. Exorcisms have now become a last resort, and priests must work with medical professionals throughout the entire process. Finally, there are only a few specially trained priests that were handpicked by the Vatican that can actually perform exorcisms legally. The church basically said, hey, we can't let something like this happen again. And while they never really come out and say, hey, we changed this because of her, the scholars are pretty much in a consensus that this case was the catalyst. But there's more. There was a trial that goes on to be global. Everybody's heard about it, and whether people believe in possession or not, they are all asking the same thing: how did we as a people let this happen? And that question leads to many, many debates in medicine, religious freedom, ethics, psychology. Doctors and priests both thought they were helping her, but neither system had the tools to really work together. And that's the part that haunts people. There is some supernatural stuff here, but it's unprecedented human failure that is really the collective issue. Then there's even more. In 2005, Hollywood jumps on the bandwagon with the exorcism of Emily Rose. And listen, the movie is not accurate, it's inspired by her case, but it's dramatized and fictionalized heavily. The church did not endorse it, her family doesn't support it, hence the name change, but it reignited the global interest, and suddenly millions of people who never really heard her name were watching a version of her story. Since then, her case has become one of the most researched and most misunderstood possession cases in all of modern history. Today still argue about her case like it happened yesterday. Half believe she needed doctors, half believe she needed priests, but nobody can really explain why both sides fought so hard and she still slipped through their hands. So here's the real question. If this exact case happened today, right now, with everything we know, do you honestly think we'd do any better? Now guys, I really appreciate you coming today. This is still a relatively new channel to me, and I'm really trying to get my own creative takes out there about these kind of situations. If you like more about the exorcisms or things of that nature, please subscribe or comment below on other things you want me to cover. I will be posting on TikTok, Facebook, pretty much anywhere you can find me. I'm also going to be giving it a shot on a podcast. The idea is to really put my take on these stories out there, and of course cover your stories the way you want them told. So if you like this or you have any feedback, please drop it below. I'll try to get back to everybody, and I appreciate really any support that you have. That's all I got. So thanks so much for listening and making it this far. And if you did, I don't know, maybe drop something below like, hey, I made it this far or something, right? Anyways, appreciate it. I'm out. Bye.